So recording is in process. And yeah, thank you again for being here this afternoon. This is a chat with the experts on neuromodulation. I am Nova Getz from NAMI Metro Baltimore. I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator, and we're just really grateful to be able to do these kind of programs once every month or so to bring interesting new mental health topics to our community and just to raise awareness about mental health, speak openly about it, share stories. And I am joined here this afternoon with Dr. Patricia Carlson, who is the board certified adult psychiatrist and service chief of Sheppard Pratt's TMS program, and Dr. Rettenmeyer, who's a child and adolescent psychiatrist and service chief of ECT at Sheppard Pratt, and Shannon Parkin, who is an incredible NAMI volunteer who does lead a bunch of different support groups and shares her story far and wide about ECT and her mental health journey and recovery from major depression. Obviously, I would love to give each of you a chance to introduce yourselves in just a moment. But just really quickly, for anybody here who is not familiar with NAMI or NAMI Metro Baltimore, we are a national organization all over the country that started in the 80s with a bunch of family members, people who really saw that there was a need for more supports for people living with mental health conditions, as well as caregivers. So they started a support groups and just started raising awareness and ending stigma across the country. So we are NAMI Metro Baltimore. We serve specifically the Baltimore City and Baltimore County areas, and really are focused on just helping folks who are here. So basically, we serve the 1 in 5 individuals living with mental health conditions. Obviously, since the pandemic, that number has gone up to about 1 in 3 folks experiencing anxiety and depression. And we do a lot of our work through grassroots, peer-based advocacy, education, and support. And none of what we do would be possible without incredible volunteers like Shannon and other folks who really take charge and lead all of our programs. So without further ado, I am going to toss it over to Dr. Carlson to introduce herself and also share some information about her TMS programs. And also, just for all of you joining here today, feel free to use the Q&A function throughout. If you have questions, we will get to them at the end of the presentation, and feel free to use the chat as well.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Trish Carlson, and I'm one of the psychiatrists here at Sheppard. Let me just make sure that I've got the slides up for everyone, first of all here. Oh, there we go. Does that look correct, or do I need to switch it again, Nova?
Can you click the from the beginning thing again, please?
Oh, I did that. I think there might be a delay. Sorry, everybody. We just tested this, and now we try from the beginning.
Technology.
From the beginning.
From the beginning. Here we go. There we go. Beautiful. Oh, okay, so you might want to swap your display settings. I'm sorry, Dr. Carlson.
I should swap, yes. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. And today we're going to have a short talk that's going to be given by me. I'm Dr. Carlson. I'm one of the psychiatrists here at Sheppard. I've been here for about 12 years, and then I did my residency before that here at Sheppard and University of Maryland. And I've been a lot of different departments around Sheppard Pratt in my time here, but right now I serve as the service chief for TMS, or Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation. And so that's the part I'm going to focus on today. And then after that, Dr. Rettenmeyer, who is our chief for the ECT service, is going to give a little bit of information as well. And then we'll hear from Shannon, who is an actual person who has had one of these treatments, and she'll share her experience with everyone. So let me just start with a quick introduction, just a little bit more specifics about where Dr. Rettenmeyer and I work. At Sheppard, if you all are from around Maryland, you know Sheppard has been around for a very long time, very, very old hospital that's been here for, I guess, over 100 years now. But currently we have a a new center that's called the Institute for Advanced Diagnostics and Therapeutics that opened up. It officially opened up about a year ago. But in that center, we blend together clinical care for patients that have what is sometimes considered difficult to treat illnesses, oftentimes very severe treatment-resistant depression or other illnesses. And we combine the clinical care also with research and looking at trying to develop new treatments to help people with illnesses such as depression and other mental illness. So underneath, I don't know if you can you see my mouse or can you not? Probably not.
Yes.
In the institute, we have a couple of things underneath of that umbrella. So we have the neurostimulation area, and that's where Dr. Rettenmeyer and I hang out most of the time. And underneath of that, we have TMS, and then we have ECT. And these are both considered neurostimulation modalities, and we'll explain the differences between the two. I think if you're a person who's struggled with depression or other mental illness for a long time, it's really important to understand and be educated about what treatments are out there. I know lots of times medicines, they're advertised on TV kind of ad nauseum with like the new pharmaceuticals that are available, but there are some things besides oral medications out there that can help. Also underneath of the Institute umbrella, we have what is called the Center of Excellence for Psilocybin Research. If you guys have been watching the news recently, you maybe have heard a lot about the use of psychedelics and researchers trying to figure out how we can maybe use those types of compounds to help people with depression or PTSD or a lot of other illnesses. So that's some pretty exciting research that we have going on here with Dr. Scott Aronson is running that program. So that's kind of how we're organized right now. And we're on the Towson campus at Sheppard here in Baltimore County. So neurostimulation, like what is it and why do we do it, and why is it important to think about this for possible treatment? I know sometimes I forget this, but our bodies and our brains run off of electricity, really. We don't think about it that way. I know I don't think about it that way, but if you look at any cell in your body, and of course we have millions of cells all over the place, in different body systems. When we want something to happen in a cell, it happens by moving electrical particles back and forth. Again, this is like at this, obviously the smallest level, but that's what's happening. So when you have a medication, or if you take a medication, for example, a pill of some sort, that medication is broken down in your system and then it binds to a receptor on a cell. But really, when that happens, it opens up what we call channels, and it allows the cell to move electrical particles back and forth. And that's kind of what's happening at the nuts and bolts level of all of this. So when you take a medication, you're going to bind these receptors, the channels open, electrical stuff moves around, and you can either get the cell to do something more or maybe to do something less. And electrostimulation or neurostimulation is just kind of a more direct way to do that within the cells. So you're going more direct to the cell, and you're not having to go through the digestive system and everything else to get that type of reaction to happen. And you can stimulate a cell to do something, you can inhibit a cell to do something. Just depends on how you use the electrical energy when you're looking at the cell. So if there's anyone out there that's struggled with depression for a long time, or you have a family member that has had that for a long time, you'll know that we do have medicines now to treat depression. 75 years ago, there was not much of anything in terms of medication to help people with depression. I think it was about the 1950s, we had the first antidepressant, the tricyclics that came out, like imipramine, and they work pretty good for depression, but they have had some side effects that weren't very good, and some other risk factors with them. And then in the 80s, we had the development of Prozac and the SSRIs. And then after that, some other iterations, SNRIs like Effects or some other ones. But the point is that in 60 years, we're still kind of looking at these same receptors that we think might be the key to helping people with depression. And there are a lot of other neurotransmitters in the brain that we know do things and can help us change our mood or treat mood illnesses, but we just don't have medicines right now that that can target those or effectively target them. So people need options. Also, if you've had any type of illness, mental health or otherwise, you know that sometimes when you take oral medications, like we don't always tolerate them very well. You can have side effects. If you're on, you know, one medication, say for a heart condition, then you try to take something else, maybe for depression, then you can have interactions. So neurostimulation is really nice because you kind of go more directly to the source and you don't have as many side effects, or potentially you can have much less side effects than you could if you're adding another oral pill to your regimen. And so neurostimulation, to me, I know it sounds kind of scary. For some people, it sounds a little bit scary. But again, you know, our bodies are always using electricity and moving it around. And if you think about, you know, neurology and some other fields, they've been using electrical stimulation forever to get things to happen in the body. If we have, like if you have a really tense muscle that you want to relax, well, there's a couple ways to do that. You could, some people have what they call a TENS system, where they put a little electrodes on there and they stimulate the muscle directly, and you can get it to be more tense, you can get it to relax. And the reason why people use those is because you have less side effects than you do if you were to take a muscle relaxant pill. You know, you can go with a pill, but you're going to have more side effects. And if you go directly to the body system you're trying to treat, you can get away with a lot fewer side effects and still get relief of the symptoms. So I'm sorry, I know that was a little long on that slide, but I will speed it up and get to the point here about TMS. So TMS, again, stands for Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation. And what it is it's a non-invasive, non-drug treatment for various psychiatric and neurological disorders. In the picture down here, you can see the point of this picture is that the magnet is in a device that rests on the outside of the head. So it's nothing invasive. It's not like brain surgery or anything like that, where you're going, you know, directly in there in an invasive way. The magnet rests on the outside of the head, and what you can do is you can stimulate different areas of the brain depending on what you're trying to fix. So we have the most experience for TMS with treatment of major depressive disorder. That was FDA approved back in 2008. It took a number of years for insurance to kind of catch up and actually be willing to pay for this for people to get the treatment. But at the end of the day at Sheppard, we've been doing TMS treatment here for, I don't know, over 12 years now. And again, finally, insurance is offering coverage for that for more people. So we're just getting a lot more experience with a lot more cases and seeing people get relief from their symptoms of depression. So it treats depression. There's also a very new, just a few years ago, indication of treatment of obsessive compulsive disorder. And then again, that's kind of patchy and if at best insurance coverage. And then also a new one on smoking cessation in 2021. But I'm going to focus mostly on depression right now for this audience, but I can answer questions about the other two also, of course. So I'm not going to go into every point here because this is way too specific, but net is that when you have TMS, you're stimulating an area of the brain. You can pick different areas of the brain depending on what you're trying to treat. And we have a very small electrical current that gets generated from the magnet. And it goes down, it goes through the scalp, the little electric impulse goes through the scalp down about 1 or 2 centimeters, and it's pretty focused. So when we talk later, or when Dr. Rettenmeier talks later about ECT, when you stimulate the brain with ECT, that's a much wider area that's treated and stimulated with the electrical impulse. With TMS, it's much more focused, or pretty focused, down to about the size of about a quarter or so. So you stimulate that particular area, and then not only do we know that it stimulates that area, you're kind of opening kind of a gateway of doorways to other connections in the brain. Think of the brain as like just a big web of circuits that we still in science and medicine don't understand a lot about, unfortunately. But there are all these connections being made. And that's why I have this kind of domino image down here, because if you're stimulating one area of the brain, well, you're kind of opening up other channels and circuits that can become more active or inhibited depending on what you're trying to treat. I'm going to skip over the longer term effects because that's just a little bit detailed, but I can answer any questions about that later if anybody has any. So practical matters, like what does TMS look like? Maybe it sounds interesting, but what does it actually look like when you're getting the treatment? So TMS is a treatment that takes about between 4 and 6 weeks for people to get relief of their symptoms. I'm speaking about depression right now, but for OCD, it's also about the same. So the treatment is a daily treatment and you have to come in for treatment 5 days a week, usually for 4 to 6 weeks. And the treatment takes about 20 minutes each day. The first treatment takes a little bit longer because we have to do a setup process, but after that, it's about 20 minutes a day. And the device, basically, it looks like a big dentist chair. It should be a pretty comfortable chair. And you sit in the chair and the magnet just is kind of placed on the outside of the brain. And then we set the parameters and then it starts doing the stimulation. And again, that goes for about 20 minutes. I'm going to go on the next slide into a little bit more about some of the pros and cons to this, but just highlighting it is that, again, there's no systemic side effects. So you're not taking a pill. It's not going to give you like an upset stomach. It's not going to interact with your other medicines that you're taking. There's no downtime. People drive themselves to and from TMS. They can come on their lunch break from work and then go back to working or do whatever they want. There's no cognitive impairment that comes after having a TMS session. There are relatively few side effects. Side effects should not be severe. The most common is a headache, which is usually transient, and usually that stops after the first few treatments or the first week. And there's a very low risk of having a seizure with TMS just because we are stimulating the brain. So anything that stimulates your brain, including a medication, can have a risk of inducing a seizure. That's about 1 out of 1,000 patients risk for that, though, so it's pretty low. Let's see. So I'm just going to go through this quickly. So as I said, TMS is non-invasive. It's very safe, well tolerated overall. No drug-drug interactions. No anesthesia needed. People sometimes take Tylenol or Advil before or after the treatment, but that's pretty much about all they would need to take for any discomfort. I already mentioned there's no negative effect on cognition or memory. And I'll get in the next slide of how often does TMS work. Well, it works pretty well compared to trying antidepressant number 7. Usually with medications, as I said in that first slide, we've got a lot of medications, but a lot of them work by the same mechanism. So if you've already tried, 4 SSRIs, Prozac, Zoloft, whatever, the chance that the 5th SSRI is going to be the magic one, it's getting lower and lower with each consecutive trial that you have. So if someone's in that kind of situation, TMS is, I think, a good idea to consider trying, because I think it would have a higher chance of helping symptoms than, adding another of the same kind of medicine. Downsides to TMS, right now it's kind of time consuming. You have to come in every day, which again is not easy for people if they're feeling depressed. It doesn't work immediately, so you don't come in for 1 or 2 treatments and then, feel spectacular. I say it's kind of like going to the gym. Like when you go to the gym, like you're not going to see results, on day 1 or 2, but usually, after maybe a couple of weeks, you start to say, oh, I'm noticing some differences, and it's kind of a subtle difference. An improvement in mood or in OCD symptoms over time, over the week. So it's a gradual improvement that people see. And so it requires a little bit of patience to keep pushing through and continuing on. Other cons or downsides is that there's always insurance hoops. As I said, TMS is kind of the baby in the world of treatment, or the new baby for treatment for depression, even though it's been since 2008, that's relatively new. And for OCT, it's only been around for 3 or 4 years. And so insurance kind of really makes us jump through some hoops to show why we need or want to try this treatment for a particular person. But I make it like a personal mission to try to to try to get these things approved for anybody that we think it could be helpful for. But unfortunately, there are some people that that could benefit that right now it's not totally covered by insurance. So it's hard to self-pay for this type of treatment. Now, does it work? So here are some of the numbers for major depression. About 50 to 60% of people respond or get noticeable relief in their depressive symptoms. About 20 to 30% can reach full remission, which means a very, very low score on any type of depression rating scale. So again, that's pretty good for someone who's been resistant to medications. It's not 100%. When we get to ECT, we'll see ECT has even better numbers than this for treating treatment-resistant depression. And for OCD, just want to mention that TMS for OCD is only supposed to be used as an adjunct treatment. So it's TMS in addition to medications and OCD type specific therapy, and it helps in about 50% of the cases of people who try it for OCD. Okay, I won't go into this too much because I know I don't want to run over Dr. Rettmeyer's time. But again, the insurance coverage for TMS it's changing like every year. But right now it's mostly approved for major depressive disorder that does not have psychosis. So none of the testing for TMS covered treatment for illnesses that include psychotic features. So that's, would be an exclusion if it was a depression with psychotic features. We wouldn't use TMS for that. And they usually like to see that the person has tried a certain number of antidepressants and has not gotten enough relief from them before trying TMS. Although I will say there's a push in right now with the research that TMS could and should be considered a first-line treatment for people who don't want or can't take medications. Like if you think of sometimes older folks that have major side effects from meds, or even women in pregnancy who don't want to take medications, TMS is something that certainly could be considered. And for OCD, again, Maryland insurance does not cover that for the most part, but I'm hoping within the next 6 months to a year, that's actually going to change. So. Just a couple other things to mention. So if you're thinking about TMS, maybe just a few things or situations where TMS is not going to work. So since we're having a huge magnet generate or a magnet generate the energy to do the treatment, you can't have anything metal in your head. Similar to the same criteria as if you were getting an MRI. So when you get an MRI, they always say, do you have any metal in your body? Do you have any shrapnel? Do you have any plates, any type of that kind of thing? So if it's anything that reacts to a magnet, that's going to be something that we can't work with. Same thing if it's in your neck area. We don't want to move any metal that's already in your body and supposed to stay put. So there's some examples here listed of things that wouldn't be permitted with TMS. Although just general dental work is usually fine, fillings and braces and things like that. Some other limitations: if anybody who has epilepsy or a seizure or a history of having seizures, again, we're stimulating the brain, probably not going to do TMS on that person. Again, any psychotic symptoms, we're not going to do TMS for that person, even though there is some research right now where they're trying to see if TMS can help some types of hallucinations. And there's some other neurological conditions also where we would really need to look closely and would probably not consider TMS for. But, anybody with multiple strokes, any type of tumor in the brain, or any type of intracranial pressure issues, or severe dementia sometimes is something that we would not consider TMS being a good fit for. And finally, I just want to say, TMS, again, it's new. There's so much research happening out there. It's like hard for me to keep up with. Like every other day, there are people or researchers who are looking at all different types of way to use TMS. And I'm not sure if anybody heard in the news, I think it was about a year ago on CBS, one of the big news news stories was talking about, a different protocol that they're doing out in Stanford, where the treatment takes 5 days instead of 6 weeks. Of course, it's much longer during the day, and just with really, really great success rates for getting people into remission. So the go away point for this slide is the research is booming. I think there's tons of potential for TMS, where we've got it working now for kind of simple major depression and OCD, but I think there are all kinds of indications where we could find use for that. It's just going to take some time and research in order for us to get there. So with that, I think that's my last slide. Yes, it is. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rettmeyer. And again, we'll be available to answer any questions afterward if you have any about TMS.
Right. All right. Can you see it okay?
I think it's loading if you want to click on from current slide again. I just want to say we're seeing some great questions in the chat. And
let me see if I can see them.
Sure, no,
I didn't even have that open. I was
they're in the Q&A, but we can totally get to them after the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see it now? Is it up?
We're still stuck on this screen. If you just want to go ahead though, I think that's totally fine. Oh, there we go. Almost. Now do the swap. Here we go.
Okay.
It's catching up.
There we go. Okay.
Perfect.
Oh, wow. That's a delay. Okay. So, hello. I'm Dr. Monica Rettmeyer. I am the service chief of the ECT department. I'm also a child adolescent psychiatrist. So I kind of do double duty here at Sheppard Pratt. I've been here for about 3 years. And before that was down in Nashville at Vanderbilt. And basically kind of did more child adolescent when I first got here, and then once COVID hit, a lot of things changed. Our day program had to shut down and different things, and so I ended up kind of almost inheriting the ECT department, and have been working really hard to kind of keep everything up and running through this pandemic and all of the things that go on with that. So wanted, I guess, to thank you again also for allowing me to kind of come and talk to you. Mindful of time though, I also want to make sure, how much time do I have, Nova?
Good question. Let's plan to let Shannon begin sharing her story at 1:38, 1:40.
Okay. All right. All right. I can do that. And I can talk fast. Sure. All right. So ECT. So basically, what is ECT? I mean, Dr. Carlson did a great job of explaining what neuromodulation is and how we believe that things work within the area that we're in. ECT has been around since the 1930s. It basically is a therapeutic procedure that has efficacy in certain treatment refractory illnesses within psychiatry, specifically major depressive disorder, both bipolar and unipolar, and also catatonia. It is used for other things, which I'll get into, but the main core functions and where it came from was truly related to initially for psychotic disorders, but then also within depression. It uses a small, carefully controlled electrical current between 2 electrodes that we specifically place in certain areas of the scalp. And it basically has a connection point through pulses that go back and forth that creates a seizure in the brain. It is a controlled seizure. To date, it is the most effective and reliable form of treatment for severe refractory depression. So qualifications. So according to the American Psychiatric Association, which is one of our major governing bodies, the primary uses are when you need a rapid, definitive response because the severity of the psychiatric illness is, or actually the medical illness is so severe that we don't have time for medications to slowly do their thing. Also, it's used whenever the risks of medications outweigh the risks of ECT. So oftentimes we think of women who may have really pronounced depression with psychotic features, and they're pregnant, and we don't want to give medications to the woman because it's going to affect the baby. And so we could actually use ECT in those situations. Also, if the main thing and where most of our patients come from is if there's a history of poor medication response, they've tried multiple medicines and just nothing has worked. And that really is it's almost a universal statement with a lot of our patients is I've tried everything and nothing works. ECT works. Also, patient strong preference. I mean, obviously, we're not going to start this treatment if you've only been on one medication usually, unless it's something where you really need a rapid response. But for those who've had at least 2 trials of antidepressants or mood stabilizers, if it's bipolar depression and it's not working, ECT definitely is something that we can think about. It does not have to be the last treatment that people go to, which is oftentimes what happens. Secondary uses, poor responses, or just where it's just not enough, where you get partly better but not really better. ECT has a place there too. And also then kind of going back to if we're worried that there's a time element or a further worsening of someone's illness where they've stopped eating or drinking, where it becomes a huge medical risk where they could die if they don't get a treatment. So where ECT works best and where we use it. So FDA approved for major depressive disorder as well as bipolar depression, and of course catatonia. Catatonia, for those who don't know, is we don't, again, totally know exactly in the brain how or why it does what it does. The way I think about it is it comes out of really complex psychiatric illnesses that have gotten to a space where they are so debilitating to the brain that it stops functioning the way that it's supposed to. And either people will start to withdraw to themselves, they stop eating, stop drinking, stop moving, will sit for like hours in these odd positions, these unique positions and nothing pulls them out of it. Or they end up in the opposite end of it where they end up so revved up that they can't even slow down. But it has to do with the primary psychiatric illness making everything in the brain a whole lot worse, where the brain can't function the way it needs to. You can actually have vital sign changes and it can be very, very dangerous. Other common diagnoses, things like mania, psychosis. We can use it for aggression in autism for individuals that are harming themselves or harming other people and they're not able to keep themselves safe. It can actually be used in epilepsy for something called status epilepticus, as well as neuroleptic malignant syndrome, which are kind of medication-related issues in that one. So, as Dr. Carlson alluded to, the remission rate for depression within ECT is 80 to 90% effectiveness. For severe resistant depression, so that's depression that I've tried every medication under the sun and nothing has worked, it has a 50 to 60% response rate. For older folks, we find they actually are the best responders for ECT. Oftentimes, individuals that have really significant depression or psychotic features to the depression do the best, or really almost like an anxious distress, they do really well. We can do treatments. Oftentimes people will say like, oh, there's a personality disorder, specifically cluster B, we can't do ECT. You can, but the effective remission and response rates usually are lower because there is a component of that particular illness where the individual, it's like we can help you pull you out of the depression, but we can't fix the other psychosomatic or psychosocial struggles that someone's dealing with. So how they interact with the world or maladaptive behaviors, those we really can't help with, but we can help with the depression specifically. So thinking about ECT, the initial thing that we need to be thinking about, one is safety. Is the patient safe enough to be doing this treatment as an outpatient, or does it make more sense for them to be inpatient with us in the hospital where you have somebody monitoring constantly? Oftentimes we want to know what kind of medication trials have been tried. And at the same time, also if they've had issues with those medicines, if they've had previous trials of TMS, ketamine, ECT, and if they've responded to ECT in the past, much better chance of responding again. We oftentimes, not oftentimes, we definitely will do a medical clearance before we do any ECT on an individual. That includes basic lab work and baseline EKG and a medical clearance from one of our medicine doctors, just to make sure the patient's safe enough to do this treatment. And of course, the other part of this is we have to make sure that the individual can consent and understands what they're getting into and what they're doing. This is a voluntary procedure. This is not someone that we force someone to, it's not something that we force someone to do. It's something that we want to make sure that they are aware of and understand the risks and benefits and can make an informed decision. Because it does, as Dr. Carlson said, it does require a certain amount of baseline understanding of going under anesthesia, which means I will be asleep, which means someone will be breathing for me, which means I'm going to I'm having a seizure during this, and those risks and benefits that kind of come, it's a balance between those two. So a general informed consent, but again, we can also tailor it if there are certain medical comorbidities. So heart issues, lung issues, things that may increase your risk of side effects. Because we do use anesthesia, there is about a 1 in 10,000 risk of death, which is about the same as having your gallbladder taken out. So it's actually pretty rare to have a significant issue with this. It's actually very safe, but it is something that we talk about. So Some of the basic contraindications, there are no absolute contraindications to ECT, but there are relative contraindications. Being mindful of time, I'm not going to go into all of these. But the big things is making sure that you don't have a big mass in your brain that is causing increased pressure that's going to cause a risk of having strokes or other types of complications from this treatment. So a course itself is usually between anywhere from 8 to 14 treatments. It's usually on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of spacing, but we can space it out if need be. We very rarely would do a Monday through Friday series just because you need time in between to let the brain rest and kind of resettle, and then you do the next treatment every other day. Most individuals will start to have some improvement, and it's small steps, little things like my depression isn't as heavy as it was before, or I actually felt good for about 2 hours and then I slipped back down. And it's a step-by-step improvement as you go through this series. Usually by treatment number 6 or 7, you're starting to see something, but everybody's unique. Sometimes you need fewer, sometimes you need more treatments, but we do check in before every treatment to really see how everyone is doing. So it is a truly customized treatment that you have. Once you kind of reach your goals, then we basically have like back to baseline, if you know what that is, and in stable mood, then we usually space a little bit just to make sure it sticks, and then we stop and see how things go. Maintenance is a different category, which usually comes along whenever you're needing further treatments, because once we stop the treatments within about a month to 3 months, people start to slip back, at which point then we want to make sure that you kind of maintain stability, and so we need to space things out a little bit more. Common side effects, usually headaches, body aches, jaw soreness. Those get better over time. You can have kind of what we call post-ictal disorientation, which is feeling a little bit foggy after the treatment because you just had a seizure and you've had anesthesia. That clears before we release you back home. The number one thing that's going to stop someone from finishing an ECT series is actually struggles with memory. It is very common to have short-term kind of memory fogginess in and around the treatments. Some folks will say, you know what, I don't really remember how to access a particular word really quickly, and it tends to be an additive effect. So it doesn't happen the first few treatments, but by treatment number 10 or 11 or 12, you're starting to notice that fogginess. The reason that we don't want people driving while you're having this treatment, also the reason we don't want you working, because we need to make sure that you're allowing yourself to rest and recuperate and actually get better. And if you try to layer too much on, the results aren't usually as long lasting, or it takes longer usually. Pros and cons, again, we require anesthesia and an IV. Oftentimes folks will that can be a stressful experience. Pros of it though, very rapid response. Within a couple weeks, you're feeling better. And this is usually after years of feeling absolutely terrible. It's very safe and well tolerated. We can use it in pregnancy. We don't do that here at Sheppard because we don't have OBGYN, but we can do that. Again, it's also something though that one of the other pros is it's been around since the 1930s is when they first discovered it, and it was in full effect in the 1950s. So insurance is very well versed in it. And it usually, as long as we, of course, have the documentation to say, yes, you've tried these different things, it can be very helpful. And it doesn't really require a lot of hoops. And it also can be used with folks with epilepsy. You basically just keep you on your anti-epileptics. So moving forward, things that we're looking at, again, using magnets instead of electricity to cause seizures. Also, like there are studies that are going on looking into alternate placement of electrodes to try and help to reduce side effects and different things. There's imaging now that we have better imaging with MRIs to actually show, okay, this is what we know is happening in the brain, because oftentimes to this day, we still don't totally know why ECT works the way that it does. We have theories, but the absolute concrete, we just don't know. And that's partially because we can't biopsy a live brain. It's not safe. So we're working on it, but imaging is definitely kind of helping to show us more. Final sign to learn more, you can kind of actually Google or kind of type this in, or Google Sheppard Pratt space ECT or TMS. Also, you can often also call our departments and we'd be happy to talk to you more. I think that's it for me. That was fast. I apologize.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rettenmeier. And it's a good thing that we are recording this in case you do want to refer back to any of these slides. I'll send a little follow-up email probably tomorrow to everybody. But without further ado, I would love to toss the ball over to Shannon. Shannon, I'm going to spotlight you and take the floor.
Okay, how many minutes do I have?
I'd say you can go up to like 150, 152, and then
Okay,
I'd love
I
to leave
will
time
aim
for
for that.
questions.
And I don't speak as fast as the doctors because I've had some traumatic brain injuries. but I am grateful to be here.
Grateful for you.
Thank you for asking me to talk today about how electroconvulsive therapy, which I will refer to as ECT, aided in my recovery from severe depression after I attempted suicide in 2015. I have been a NAMI inner-own voice speaker since January of 2019, so I will share an overview of my story using the inner-own voice format, emphasizing ECT. I am the proud mother of 2 children in college. Throughout my life, I've surrounded myself with children's books. I'm also active in my faith community, Silver Spring United Methodist Church, where I've been a member since 2008. In addition to my experience as an inner-own voice speaker, I have co-facilitated more than 60 virtual NAMI connection recovery support groups in the last year, and have had an article published in USA Today and co-presented with my pastor on how faith communities can welcome and support suicide attempt survivors at the Maryland Suicide Prevention Conference in 2021. I had some challenges in my childhood, as most people do. When I was 17 in 1984, while hiking on the Rockies, I accidentally fell 25 feet. Some amazing friends ran down the mountain and called flight for life. Other friends sat with me on the mountainside until the helicopter arrived to fly me to a Boulder hospital. I suffered a traumatic brain injury and was comatose for about 4 days. I have no memory of my hiking fall or the first 2 weeks afterwards. I delayed entering college a year, but eventually completed both college and graduate school. I worked first in a nonprofit and then teaching high school at private schools, but each job turned out to be too difficult for me, given my deficits due to my brain injury. I married in 1996. My 2 wonderful children were born in 2001 and 2004. Yet the long-term effects of my brain injury, including confusion, depression, and fatigue, persisted. In an attempt to compensate for my deficits, I controlled what I could by over-exercising and limiting my eating. I was diagnosed with anorexia in college, and those habits followed me for 30 years. Although I never drank or took drugs, undereating and over-exercising was my addiction. I neglected basic household chores and my physical health. In 2010, my marriage ended. After a couple of years, I was able to get on Social Security disability, but still had severe depression. In 2015, my mental illness caused me to attempt suicide by jumping in front of a metro train. Rescuers and doctors were able to save my life. I suffered multiple broken bones and another injury to my brain. Doctors had to amputate the front portion of both my feet. I have no memory of my suicide attempt or the first 6 weeks afterwards. I spent 6 months hospitalized, including 4 months on the behavioral health unit, where doctors found the right combination of the antidepressants that worked best for me as I learned to walk again on my partial remaining feet. After my hospital stay, I moved into the first of several assisted living facilities where I resided for 5 years. Soon after I left the hospital, I began ECT. On the day of each treatment, I would have nothing to eat or drink after midnight. I would wake early, and one of the caregivers at the facility where I live would drive me to a local medical clinic where I received the treatments. At each session, electrodes were taped to my forehead. I received an anesthesia, so I was sedated while my brain was electrically stimulated. Nurses held my hands as they placed the IV and stood beside me with smiling faces when I woke at the end of each session. I did present a challenge to them, as the usual way to determine responsiveness under a sedative is monitoring the toes. This was not possible in my case, as I have only partial feet. But these nurses adapted and never lost their ability to smile, encouraging me to do the same. After each session, I would be driven back to the facility where I would usually take a nap. These treatments continued off and on for about 18 months. Except for the mornings when I had ECT, I continued taking my antidepressant medications that I still take regularly. Even before ECT, one of my friends called the helpline of NAMI Montgomery County, where I learned about support groups and connected with a recreation therapist. This recreation therapist helped so much, and the ECT helped. In April of 2018, my psychiatrist told me that my depression was in full remission. He also told me he thought I was ready to ride the Metro again, but he wanted to ride with my recreational therapist at first. We rode together each week for the first month. On our third trip together, as we stood on the platform, I told Debbie, my recreation therapist, about the phone conversation I had had the previous night with my daughter, that it ended when I said to my daughter, "I love you very much." My daughter had replied, "I love you very much too, Mom." As I was telling my recreation therapist about that conversation, I saw a mother bidding goodbye to her own toddler in a stroller by making a heart shape with her fingers. By focusing on the paired images of the heart-shaped fingers and the echo of my own daughter's words, "I love you very much too, Mom," I was able to watch the train arrive at the station with a smile on my face, something I had previously never dreamed possible. By using that same imagery on our next trip, I found I could watch the train arrive at the station without fear. 2 weeks later, in May of 2018, my psychiatrist gave his full approval for me to ride the Metro independently. A woman from my church, whom I will call Olivia, happened to be on the train I jumped in front of that Sunday morning in 2015. She went to church and prayed for the person who had been struck without knowing it was me. 3 years later, when I was given approval to ride the Metro independently, I happily shared the news at my church while sitting with Olivia and other church friends. 2 months after I'd begun riding the Metro independently, I learned Olivia would be leading a group from our church to go to a baseball game and riding on the Metro. I wanted to go, but I was worried my presence on the train would cause church members to be uncomfortable. Very tentatively, I asked Olivia if I could join the group. Without a moment's hesitation, she said, "Definitely, I've got your back, always have, always will." With those words and a successful trip to the game, I knew I never had, never would walk alone. In October of 2020, I moved out of assisted living. On Easter Sunday, 2022, it was announced from the pulpit while I was sitting with Olivia and another church friend I had known for more than a decade that I had won a national award for sharing my mental health recovery story. The end of April 2022, I made my first independent plane flight in 12 years to receive the Transforming Lived Experience Award from the American Association of Suicidology, the oldest suicide prevention organization in the nation, at their conference in Chicago. And yes, I did go through security wearing socks on my partial feet. As I received the award, I said, I spent decades never knowing anyone could recover after a suicide attempt or get over suicidal ideation. I know many of you have your own mental health recovery stories. We need you to talk and write about your recovery. Each and every story matters. I found my lens of hope and grace and know you can as well. Resilience is built through the community. Your story is important. Believe in it and shout it out. As you can see, the help I received from ECT was part of my recovery, but finding my lens of hope also included antidepressants and the support of NAMI, my recreational therapist, faith community, friends, and family. Thank you. And I think I was 1 minute over.
Shannon, oh my goodness, what a powerful, powerful story. Words are tough. I mean, thank you for sharing your story with us. And for any of you who are listening in and you want to learn more or follow Shannon, if you want to drop in the chat links to your essays and stuff,
Okay.
Yeah.
they can email you.
Of
I will
course.
put my email address in the chat.
Okay, wonderful.
Largely because I'm not coordinated enough to find everything and put it in the chat in the time we have left.
Sure. So
But you can email me if you want to get in touch, or just find me on LinkedIn at Shannon Heath Parkin, and that's on LinkedIn. And if you just Google Shannon Heath Parkin LinkedIn, you'll find my LinkedIn account.
wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Rettenmeier and Dr. Carlson, for sharing everything about TMS and about ECT as well. I don't want to take up too much time just talking, but we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. The first one is, are either treatments good for someone who has also had cerebral palsy and dystonia? So if either of you could take that question, that'd be awesome.
I know, can you hear me still? I know for TMS that's something that they're looking at, or neurologists are looking at, but I would say it depends. I would say I don't think that's a FDA approved treatment for dystonia. It would depend on where and how severe the symptoms are, but I know there are a lot of neurologic, there's a lot of neurologic research going on for people who've had strokes who have dystonia, and all different types of neurological, neuromuscular issues. So I would encourage that person to maybe reach out to their neurologist as a first starting place, and then perhaps a specialty neurologist hospital such as Hopkins, or one of the ones where they do a lot of more advanced research for treatment. I don't think that's a current treatment, but it could be. I'm not 100% sure.
I guess I'm not sure if the participant was wondering, like, if these are like co-occurring conditions on top of depression or something, like, would those be a barrier to receiving the treatment? I'm not sure how they meant it, but either way.
I'm sorry. I thought it meant to treat the dystonia. No, I mean, possibly not. I think it would depend. I think here at Sheppard, we've been doing TMS ever since the very beginning. Dr. Aronson that I work with did some of the initial studies. So we treated a lot of people and had a lot of freedom to treat people in the studies, and weren't bound by insurance issues. I think the one thing that I think with that particular case is we'd have to see what the symptoms are specifically, and if there's any what the brain injury was specifically. If it's an area that's right underneath of where the magnet would be stimulating, then might not be a good idea. And I think that would probably, for insurance, be something that they would see as a contraindication, I would think, but you never know until we find out more details. So
Got it.
feel free to reach out to us and see if the particulars of that case might be something that we could consider.
On the ECT side, I would say, and Shannon brought up a good point when she talked about her traumatic brain injuries. Oftentimes, we are able to, because traumatic brain injuries in general create a whole different set of struggles. Oftentimes, I mean, the wiring of the brain is unique and very special, and there are things that can heal and some things that can't. And the brain does find new pathways and creates new ways to kind of get around impairments. For ECT, it is not likely an absolute contraindication. It's just a matter of knowing where, if like source of like the dystonia, and of course then cerebral palsy, or like even honestly even MS. I mean, we can do ECT within that space as well. It's just a matter of having a good understanding, speaking to the neurology team about, okay, so where are the deficits? What are we looking at? I mean, there are ways in which we can kind of reduce side effects as it relates to kind of muscle movement whenever you're having the treatment. It can also, again, it's making sure just that the patient is safe while we go through this. So it really is usually, it's like a team, it's a team effort where we really kind of get the specialists involved, but it is definitely something we have done in the past.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. And then somebody else asked, as a person who has previously had TMS treatment, it was recommended that I have a second treatment. Do you recommend having the treatment more than once? So I think they might be saying they've gone through one line of treatment and now they're thinking of going through again.
Yeah, so that happens commonly. If the person had a full course of TMS, the 4 to 6 weeks, and actually got a good response, what happens after that, is variable. So about a third of people after they have one treatment can stay pretty well. Their depression symptoms stay at bay for up to a year or more. And again, when I didn't mention this, but during TMS, people can stay on most of their medications. There are a couple of them that we might adjust a little bit, but for the most part, you stay on your medication, unless it's a medication that's not doing anything at all helpful. then we say, well, let's maybe get rid of that. But about a third of the people stay well in depression, remission, or reduced symptoms for a pretty long time. The other 2/3 of people kind of are in the middle ground. Sometimes people, after a month or two, they're like, my symptoms are back, and the medicines still don't work. And so in a case like that, if there was a positive response the first time around, then yeah, you can do another round of TMS. I mean, you can certainly do another round. As far as I know, there's no cognitive or side effect issue that would cause you to not want to do that, because it's pretty well tolerated, as we stated. So that's certainly something that could be considered. I do think sometimes insurances, again, I hate to keep bringing them up, but they're there. We have to deal with them. Sometimes if the positive effect did not last for a long time, let's say it only lasted a week or two, and then the person's like, I'm depressed again, then sometimes insurance, they'll be like, well, that wasn't robust enough of a response for us to do a whole nother round of 6 weeks. And the other thing that, we didn't talk about is that sometimes people can go between treatments like ECT and TMS. Sometimes if somebody gets, or very severely depressed, they might need ECT. But that person, if they're doing a little bit better, or maybe not as severe in their depressive symptoms, can sometimes do all right with a TMS treatment too, and vice versa. And that's kind of nice with what we have going here at Sheppard right now. Dr. Rettmeyer and I both do ECT and TMS. So sometimes we see people for a consult and they're not sure what they should have. They just know they don't feel good. And so we can kind of help point in the direction of where we think what treatment will be the most helpful, and kind of discuss the ups and positives and negatives of considering each one of those. But yeah, you can certainly consider another round of it.
Wonderful, thank you. I guess there aren't any more questions in the Q&A, but I just want to ask or open up the floor to each of you if you have any closing remarks that you would like to make. I mean, now's go for it.
Well, I see somebody just put in the chat, about where is this heading and what's going forward. And with TMS, again, it's so new that it's very exciting. And I didn't get into it, but just treatment for depression. Bipolar depression is another very severe illness that, we know we can treat some bipolar depression with TMS. It's just not officially given the stamp of approval by the FDA right now. So that's something that I think we need to work on, because people with bipolar depression don't respond well to the meds always either. So, and they have different struggles with meds. Also, I think for addictions for TMS, that's a big area that worldwide research is happening on. As I mentioned, we have a smoking cessation protocol for TMS, which is great. But even better would be if we could find something to help opiate use disorders or alcohol, just another option for those types of disorders. That would be absolutely spectacular, I think. And again, that research is happening right now. So. They're just, again, psychotic disorders, also all kinds of neurologic disorders, Parkinson's, all kinds of stuff. They're using TMS to try to see what we can get going.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you.
Like one quick thing I guess I'd like to say is just in the biggest within all of this is oftentimes I know people oftentimes feel that they're alone and they don't know what to do. And so my biggest, I'd say, takeaway is don't worry alone. If you have questions, reach out. Talk to us. We have a phenomenal staff that do a great job of touching base with all of the patients who are interested, and even to the point of like, okay, well, is this what you need? I mean, you just don't worry alone.
Absolutely. No, couldn't agree more. And I mean, to Shannon's point, it sounds like you had an amazing team of people and friends and community to really rely on. And then you got involved in community and sharing your story. So I really appreciate you just telling us about how important it is to just open up and start those conversations. So thank you all so much for being here. We will keep in touch. I will follow up with you and share Shannon's information, the information from Dr. Carlson and Dr. Rettenmeyer's emails and the links at the ends of the presentations and stuff. Thank you all for being here on the panel too. This has been a really, really eye-opening conversation. I hope you all have a great afternoon and take care. Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Shannon.
Bye.